when we're describing pulse, we're describing what we feel. Remember we said bradypnea, tachypnea, and apnea? Remember we talked about that? The same kind of terms apply to your pulse. You've got bradycardia, which would be less than what? 60. Then tachycardia, greater than 100. And then we call them dysrhythmias. At this point in your nursing career, you don't need to worry about specific heart dysrhythmias like heart block and all that stuff. You're going to learn that as a senior. I can't do that. I'm not a cardiac nurse. But you know, if you're listening to the heart and it's an abnormal rate or rhythm, that's a dysrhythmia. If they have an extra beat or it's, they're skipping a beat, those are called dysrhythmias. Okay. All right, so when you are talking about the volume of a pulse, is it strong or is it weak, thready, or bounding? What would be a thread? Who would have a thready pulse? Older person or somebody who's dying. A thready pulse, what that means is it's easily occluded. And remember we talked about older adults. Their arterial walls are they're not elastic anymore. They're very weak. Remember we talked about that? And so they're very easily occluded. So when you're feeling someone's pulse, it's easy for it to be cut off, and that's called thready. Bounding, you think about bounding as someone who has been exercising. They've been running. Have you ever seen somebody who's exercised a lot and then they stop and then you can see their pulse in their throat even. I mean, it's just really, that's bounding. That would be a problem, though, if you've got somebody who has not been exercising, yet their pulse is doing that. What that's telling me is that their heart is just about to give out. It's trying its hardest to pump, and it's pumping against a situation that's not looking so good. So, got to be really careful about that. We rate it on a scale of 0 to 4 plus, and you want somebody's pulse to be anywhere from 2 to 3 plus. Easily palpable, or a full pulse, which would be 3. Zero is a bad problem. We all know that, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. When we used to use a paper database, and I'll never forget somebody turning one in to me one time, and I had told them in my group, do not ever put NA, not applicable. That's a bad thing, right? If you can get it, if it's something you can do, NA won't be somewhere if you've got a male patient, but it talks about how many children they had or they gave birth to. Okay, that would be an NA. But I had one turned in to me one time that under pulses they put NA, and I thought, well, that's bad. If pulses are not applicable to this patient, then we've got a problem. So don't ever do that. Okay, equality, of course, that's assessing both sides, and we mentioned that. That's nothing new. We can kind of move on from that. Okay. All right, I'm going to show you where to find the apical pulse, and then like I said, on Tuesday, I'm going to let you do it on each other. You can practice it at home. So the next couple of pictures, I want you to kind of feel on yourself, okay, when we're finding the apical pulse. So the first thing we're going to find is the angle of Lewy and the suprasternal notch. So if you're feeling down, there's a little angle right here where the sternum begins, right? And then if you run your little finger down, you should feel a little ridge right under that suprasternal notch. You feel it? Just kind of a ridge. Okay, angle of Lewy and the suprasternal notch. All right, now once you find that, you need to take your fingers and you need to follow them over. Okay, and that is the second intercostal space. You should have a space in between each rib. Your fingers should just kind of fall into almost a hole or a gap. That's the second intercostal space. Okay, and that's what she's doing here. She's moving her fingers over. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to take your fingers and you're going to count them down. So you find the second intercostal space, and then you move your fingers and you find the third intercostal space. Can you do that? Okay. And you move them down to the third or the fourth intercostal space. Now again, if you have a lot of breast tissue, they have to lift the breast to find the fifth and the sixth intercostal space is under the breast tissue. Okay, so the guys will probably have a lot easier time with this than us. But fifth and sixth intercostal space is under the breast tissue along the nipple line. Okay? Fifth and sixth intercostal space. Okay? When you find that fifth intercostal space, I said seventh earlier, but it's fifth. Fifth intercostal space, you're going to slide over, okay, to the mid-clavicular line. Mid-clavicular line. Okay? Okay? To the right of the mid-clavicular line. That is where your apical pulse is heard. That is the apical pulse. Okay? But yeah, where does your CNA instructors love to tell you it's right up here because it's a lot easier. This is not it. Your true apical pulse is to the side of the mid-clavicular line in the fifth intercostal space. Okay, and you see how her fingers have counted down there? I think my thing's died. Okay? That is also, let me tell you something, that is also called the point of maximum impulse, PMI. That is also called the PMI, or the point of maximal impulse. Okay, so here's her mid-clavicular line. Okay? Now, when you go home this weekend, I want you to practice that on somebody. You have them lay down in bed, count down. You know, find your superstone notch, follow your finger over. That's the second intercostal space. And then take your fingers and count down. 3, 4, and then 5 is under the breast tissue, under the nipple line, and then find the mid-clavicular. Okay, and go to the side. And you're going to be able to tell. That is where the heart lies closest to the chest wall. That's why that's called the point of maximum impulse, because that's where the heart lies closest to the chest wall. If you think about the shape of the heart, you know, there's that little pointy bottom part there. That's real technical, isn't it? That pointy bottom part, and it lies closest to the chest wall there. If you ever have trouble hearing someone's heart rate, you have them turn to their left side. And what that does is that throws the heart even closer to the chest wall. And then you will be able to hear some deep heart sounds such as murmurs. What side of the stethoscope would we use for that, do you think? The deep sounds, the bail. That's when you're going to turn your stethoscope around and use the bail to hear. You're listening for murmurs. Okay? All right. Now, I talked to Ms. Beaver. She said that she is uncomfortable showing you your test, so we're going to have to wait on Ms. Chandler. Sorry about that. So we'll have to wait for her on, I guess, it'll be Tuesday. She's kind of sticky. So we'll have to wait on that. At the end of each row, you should have a sticky notes or sticky pad of some sort. I want everybody to take one. This is something I do when I lecture a lot as well. And I want you to try to think of 5 things that you learned today. Write it down on that sticky note pad and put it at the top of your desk. We're the only ones who use this room, so we're going to leave them in here. And each day that I lecture, we're going to add to that. So at the end, you're going to be constantly reminding yourself of what you've learned. So think of 5 things today that you've learned. And then I want you to stick it up at the top of your desk. I'm not going to collect them or anything like that. Oh, you do? Okay, we'll take it with you. I thought we were the only ones supposed to be in here. Okay, take it with you, and then on Tuesday we're going to put it on the top of our desk, okay? So everybody get a sticky and think of 5 things you learned today. And don't put that lightsaber sound as coming. That has nothing to do with physical assessment.